I never thought my life could unravel in a single afternoon, but that's exactly what happened. I was 26, living in a modest apartment in Denver, working as a graphic designer, and finally starting to feel like adulthood had some rhythm. My family lived a few hours away, in suburban Colorado Springs, and I'd always been close to them, or so I thought. My parents, my older brother Matt, even my Aunt Claire, they were the people I trusted more than anyone. It all started with a phone call that I'll never forget. Mom's voice trembled as she asked me to come home immediately. It's serious, she said. I tried to coax more details out of her, but she kept repeating that line like a mantra. The unease had already gripped me. I grabbed my coat and drove through the snow-slick streets, my mind running through every possible scenario. When I arrived, the living room was crowded. My parents were there, faces pale and drawn. Matt stood in the corner, arms crossed, with that expression I knew too well, the one that meant he was ready to pounce on my guilt, even if it didn't exist. And then there was Claire, shaking her head as if she'd already decided my fate. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. Without preamble, my mom handed me a folder. I opened it and my stomach dropped. There were pictures, grainy, taken with what I assumed was a phone, showing my credit card being used at a local electronics store to buy expensive gaming equipment. The problem? I had no memory of going there. My name was on the receipts, my card number on the transactions. "Please tell me you're joking," I said, my hands trembling. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Honey, we've tried to cover for you, but Matt saw the statements. You've been stealing from us, from all of us." Matt smirked. "I told you, Mom, I've been saying something's off for months. I just didn't want to believe it." The accusation hit me like a truck. Every memory, every conversation, every laugh we'd shared, it felt like a lie now. I opened my mouth, tried to explain that I hadn't been near that store, that someone must have stolen my card, but their faces hardened with judgment. They didn't want to hear it. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Why would I?" "Why would you do this?" Matt interrupted, his voice sharp. "Maybe because you've always been the golden child, the one who never worked as hard as I did? Maybe this is just your way of taking what's ours." I shook my head, feeling a panic I hadn't known since childhood. "Matt, you're wrong. I would never." But they didn't listen. The seed of doubt had been planted, and they were too scared to pull it out. By the end of that evening, I wasn't just accused, I was exiled. My parents didn't speak to me for weeks, Matt texted only venom, and even Claire blocked my number. The apartment that used to feel like home had become a prison of disbelief. And just like that, my family turned against me, and my life spiraled into chaos I could not yet see the bottom of. The weeks that followed felt like living underwater. Every call I made went unanswered. Every text I sent was ignored or returned with a cold, clipped message from Matt that cut deeper than any insult could. I tried reaching out to Mom, desperate for even a hint of trust, but she refused to talk, claiming she needed time to process everything. Aunt Claire, who had always been my confidant growing up, sent me a single line. "Sometimes people show their true colors. Yours just happened to surface." I felt completely alone. I didn't just lose their trust, I lost my sense of reality. Everything I knew about my family, about myself, seemed to collapse at once. Friends tried to comfort me, but I couldn't shake the embarrassment and despair. How do you explain to someone that the people who were supposed to protect you, believe in you, had turned their backs over a set of fraudulent transactions you didn't commit? I contacted the bank immediately, filing disputes and requesting an investigation. Each phone call to customer service left me frustrated and exhausted. The claims process moved slowly, and with each passing day, Matt's voice echoed in my mind. "We gave you chances, and you betrayed us." I wanted to scream, to shake them and make them see the truth, but I had no leverage. The folder of receipts they had clutched like a weapon was all they needed to cement my guilt in their eyes. I even went so far as to hire a private investigator, pooling together what little savings I had. For months, I waited, hoping for something, anything, to prove that the transactions were fraudulent. But every lead came back cold. Fraud was hard to trace, and the person who had used my card had left almost no trail. With every failed lead, my confidence wavered. Was I insane? Was it somehow my fault? The isolation gnawed at me like fire. At work, I became distracted and jittery. My boss noticed my slipping focus and subtle distress, but didn't pry. I couldn't tell anyone about the family fallout. The shame was too heavy. I withdrew further, rarely leaving my apartment except for essentials. Grocery trips became exercises in anxiety, the cashier's polite questions feeling like judgments. Even my closest friends grew distant. There's only so long someone can sit with a person in perpetual misery before they quietly step away. One night, after a particularly rough day, I sat on my apartment floor, the folder of receipts spread in front of me. I stared at the numbers, at the store names, at my own name printed across the documents in cold, indifferent ink. "This isn't me," I whispered to the empty room. "I didn't do this. I wouldn't do this." Tears streamed down my face, part frustration, part hopelessness. And yet, for all my despair, I refused to give up. I couldn't. I had to prove my innocence, not just for my own peace of mind, but because I knew, somewhere deep down, that one day the truth would surface. For now, though, I was trapped. My family had abandoned me, my world had shrunk to these four walls, and I was powerless to make them believe me. The years passed slowly, like I was wading through molasses. Denver became my fortress and my cage, a place where I could rebuild without interference, without constant reminders of betrayal. I changed apartments twice, started working for a different design firm, and threw myself into my projects with a kind of obsessive determination. Every completed illustration, every satisfied client became a small victory against a chaos my family had left behind. At first, the silence from them was suffocating. I marked the calendar, counting the weeks, months, and years since the last message from Mom. Birthdays, holidays, family gatherings, I watched them pass on social media, muted their stories, pretended I didn't care. And slowly it worked. The constant ache dulled. I didn't smile as much as I used to, but I smiled. I felt capable again. I even started dating. For the first time in years, I let someone close, a kind-hearted woman named Emily who worked at a local bookstore. She never knew the full extent of my family's betrayal, and maybe that was for the best. With her, I found laughter, warmth, and the kind of stability that had felt impossible for so long. We moved in together, adopted a scrappy terrier named Max, and I allowed myself to hope. But hope, as I learned, can be fragile. One rainy evening, almost exactly 5 years after the accusation, I received an envelope slipped under my door. It was unmarked, the handwriting neat and precise. My hands shook as I tore it open, expecting perhaps a bill or a spam letter. Inside were photographs, clear, indisputable photos of Matt standing in the electronics store, swiping my stolen card at the counter. The images were dated the very month Mom had first confronted me. Alongside them were receipts in Matt's handwriting, some partially torn but legible enough to confirm what I had long suspected. He had been using my identity for months, and I had been the scapegoat. There was also a note, typed and impersonal. "Truth has a way of resurfacing. You were never guilty. You were just too loyal to see it." My heart pounded, a mix of anger, relief, and disbelief. Years of isolation, humiliation, and anxiety, all triggered by lies, by betrayal from the person I once considered my closest ally. I sank into the couch, staring at the photos, feeling the weight of every lost year. For the first time in half a decade, I allowed myself to cry, not for myself, but for the innocence stolen, for the trust destroyed, and for the family who had turned their backs so quickly. But these tears weren't the end. They were the beginning of a plan, a reckoning. Matt had underestimated me, underestimated the fire his lies had fueled. Now, with proof in my hands, I had the power to restore my truth, and I would. I didn't sleep that night. The photographs, the receipts, the note, they burned in my mind like fire. Every moment replayed in my head. Mom's tear-streaked face, Matt's smug expression, Aunt Claire's disappointed gaze. I couldn't erase the years of isolation, but I could finally demand accountability. I waited until a Sunday afternoon to call a family meeting, a neutral location, a small cafe that none of us had claimed as ours. I sent a single, short text to each of them. "We need to talk. It's time." Predictably, there were no immediate responses. Hours later, Mom replied with a hesitant, "We'll come." Matt didn't answer. Claire reluctantly agreed. When they arrived, I felt the old familiar knot of anxiety, but this time it was different. I wasn't walking into judgment, I was walking into the opportunity for justice. I greeted them quietly, barely acknowledging their cold stares. The air was thick with tension. I pulled the folder from my bag and placed it on the table, letting the photographs fall open before their eyes. "This is what really happened," I said, my voice steady but heavy with years of hurt. "These are the receipts, the photos, the transactions that were used to accuse me. Look carefully. Look at the dates. Look at the handwriting. It's all Matt." Mom gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide. This can't be." Claire leaned forward, squinting at the images. Her voice, usually sharp, softened. I I don't understand. How did we get it so wrong?" I shook my head, anger and sadness warring in my chest. "You didn't get it wrong. You chose to believe him. You chose to turn on me without proof, without asking questions. You abandoned me when I needed you the most." Matt's face twisted. For the first time, there was no smirk, no justification, only a flicker of fear and realization. It's not what it looks like," he stammered. "Oh, but it is," I said sharply, slamming the folder on the table. "All of it. You wanted to punish me for being too successful, for having the life you envied. You wanted me to take the blame for your theft, and you almost succeeded." Tears streamed down my mother's face. I didn't know. I should have. "Should have listened," I interrupted. "Should have believed me. But you didn't. And now, after everything, it's too late to erase the damage. I've lost years to your lies." The cafe was silent, except for the sound of rain against the windows. I felt the tension press against my chest like a physical weight. Then I looked directly at Matt, my voice low and unwavering. "You owe more than apologies. You owe the truth, publicly. Everyone who believed me, everyone you hurt, I'm going to make sure they know what really happened." And just like that, the tables had turned. I was no longer the powerless scapegoat. I had the proof, the leverage, and the moral high ground. The reckoning I had waited 5 years for was finally here. The weeks after the confrontation were surreal. I released the evidence, carefully sharing it with extended family members who had been suspicious but never fully believed Matt. Slowly, the whispers of truth spread. Friends who had distanced themselves reached out, apologizing for doubting me. Social media posts clarified my innocence, and the relief was intoxicating, but it came with a bitter aftertaste. Mom called me one evening. Her voice was broken. I can't tell you how sorry I am. I failed you. We all failed you." I listened, the old ache surfacing. Years of longing for their support and love swirled in my chest, mixing with anger and disappointment. "I know," I said finally. "And yes, I forgive what you didn't know you were doing. But the trust? That's gone." Aunt Claire sent a long message filled with regrets, and even Matt attempted to justify himself, though I barely entertained it. He wanted forgiveness, but I realized that forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about me reclaiming peace. And peace didn't mean returning to the way things were. I made my decision. I would forgive in my heart, but keep my distance. Family isn't only blood, it's also respect, loyalty, and trust. Those had been shattered, and I refused to let history repeat itself. I moved forward with Emily and Max, planning a life where my happiness didn't depend on their approval. The scars remained. I still flinch at sudden accusations, still felt pangs of sadness when I thought of birthdays and holidays lost. But the truth had set me free, and that freedom was a gift I refused to squander. I embraced a life I could control, surrounded by people who had earned their place in it. In the end, I learned something vital. Betrayal cuts deep, but resilience runs deeper. I had been broken, abandoned, and humiliated, but I survived. I thrived. And no lie, no false accusation, no family feud could take that away from me ever again. I kept the folder of evidence tucked away, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. A reminder that truth, even when buried, will eventually rise. And when it does, it carries the power to heal, to vindicate, and to reclaim what was always yours. I don't speak to Matt anymore. I keep polite distance from the rest of my family. And for the first time in my life, I am finally wholly free.